Well, I think we will start here in respect to all of you who came on time. Um, my name is Ted Guest. I am the president of a national group called Criminal Justice Journalists. Many of you may know we have a daily news digest called Crime and Justice News. You're welcome to subscribe to it for free. We won't even charge you. And under the website crimjj.wordpress.com. Coincidentally, I didn't even do it today, but we did a lead story relevant to what we're going to talk about today, a story by summarizing a story by NPR about the impact of the federal budget cuts in the justice area. So again, it's an NPR story that we summarized. I would recommend that you all read that if you're interested in this area. This panel is going to be a bit different from what was in the program. I think you all know we have to propose ASC programs way back in March, which is a long time ago. Lori Robinson, who I will introduce in a moment, and I typically do policy-related panels at these ASC meetings, but it's often difficult back in March to know what is going to be the hot topic in November. Some of you may know the hot topic today in criminal justice is the release of 23,000 pages of Jeffrey Epstein files. With all due respect, I don't think there are too many research papers being done on that at this convention, but that's the hot news today. In any case, we had to make a couple of changes. Unfortunately, Jim Birch of the National Policing Institute, who's listed in the program, was unable to make it. I believe he is either in Florida or waiting for an airplane somewhere, so he was unable to make it. And we had a substitute named Julie Baldwin from American University here in DC, but she also was tied up with airline difficulties and is unable to be here, so we apologize for that. And then thirdly, we have a panelist listed from Arnold Ventures named Ashna Aurora. Now she also is, I think, traveling. Is she in Seattle? That's what she said. So she's not here, but thankfully we have Tyrell Connor from Arnold Ventures, who is one of the major funders in this area, as we know. So we apologize.
Is it true that I'm the only panelist who actually showed up?
Yes.
Other than you and Lori? Okay.
Yeah, so
and you're cheering
so
crowd.
we're sorry. These changes, some of them are inevitable given the time lapse, and who knew? We had no idea in March that we were going to be in the middle, I think, near the end of a government shutdown. I tried to go to a panel today with the Bureau of Justice Statistics, and guess what?
Nobody's there.
It didn't happen. So, also, speaking of the Justice Department, I think we assumed or thought back in March that the Justice Department would have named people from this administration to head the agencies in the Office of Justice Programs, which Lori Robinson formerly headed. Well, here we are on November 12th, and as far as I know, these people have not been appointed to head those offices. So probably we would have, if any of them had been appointed, we would have had one of them here today, but they haven't been appointed. So that's the way it is on November 12th. We're going to do the best we can here. I am guessing that a lot of you have been affected either directly or indirectly by the federal budget cuts. You might guess that I, being a journalist, probably just watching this and was not affected. but that wouldn't be true because until recently, my website for this news digest was hosted by a group that was getting a lot of federal funds, and everything was fine for 4 years during the pandemic, no problem. Well, in April, when the Justice Department cuts were announced, the group that sponsored my website lost, I think, roughly 20 of its 25 employees because they lost their money, and I had to instantly change my website. So I have been directly affected. I was not getting any federal funds directly, but again, there's been a lot of impact of this beyond the mere cutting of federal funds, which is bad enough. So here's what we're going to do in this panel, this revised panel here today. We're going to start by hearing from Lori Robinson. Lori was as I said, the head of the Office of Justice Programs, both during the Clinton administration and during the Obama administration, so has lots of history in this area and knows the whole federal funding situation, at least as it used to exist. So we're going to hear from Lori, then we're going to go to Tyrell Connor, who is a research manager, is that correct, for Arnold Ventures, to discuss what Arnold Ventures is doing and possibly what other funders may or may not be doing in this area. And last but not least, we have Nancy Levine, who is now the Dean of the Rutgers School of Criminal Justice. More recently relevant to this panel, she was the director of the National Institute of Justice during the Biden administration, so has a lot of direct experience with funding. Nancy, I should say, was also informally, I would call her my landlord because I had my office for a few years in the Urban Institute. She was the head of the justice program at the Urban Institute before NIJ. So we do have a very distinguished panel. I'm sorry we don't have all of the original people we hope to have, but we have people with a whole lot of knowledge here about the funding situation. So with that, we're going to go to the speakers in the order I said. Each will speak for about 10 or 15 minutes, depending on how long they want to speak, and then we'll open it up to questions and comments. So, Lori?
Well, thank you so much, Ted. And I appreciate the people who did come out today. It would probably be a little cozier if we were in one of those small breakout rooms, but we appreciate all of your showing up here. And Ted, thank you for the introduction. Ted and I have worked together, as he indicated, on putting policy-related panels together for ASC over, I don't know how many years, but a lot of years. And Nancy and I go back a very long way as well, and delighted with her to see how well she's doing in her new position as dean, and have her students coming out. Thank you guys for showing up. Just to add a couple of words about my background that Ted would not have probably gone into, but I think are relevant to our topic today and what I'm going to be talking about. I'm a Washington native, which actually is rather unusual in Washington. So I grew up surrounded by the political process. My father was a Capitol Hill lobbyist, and so that was the dinner table conversation and the milieu in which I was raised. So with that backdrop, I wanted to offer 3 pieces of advice on our topic today to those of you who are thinking about or trying to get funding for criminal justice research. And by the way, I should also add that I've worked in criminal justice throughout my career, but my focus has not been personally to do research. That's not my background, but on policy. So first, a piece of advice. Whatever your personal politics, it's important, especially in the Washington milieu, to act in a bipartisan manner, to gain allies, to build support for your work. We know, of course, that crime is a very hot topic on the Hill and with the executive branch right now. And focusing particularly on Capitol Hill, I'd encourage you to take steps to educate key players in the House and the Senate about your work and how the results of the research you're undertaking could help or already has helped communities more successfully address crime, because those kind of concrete examples are what could make the difference for congressional members and certainly for their staff who would have more time to delve into it, to think about tagging appropriations to go for this kind of research, to support earmarks, which are specific tags for your university or school to get money for that project. One of the lessons my father taught me was the importance of working in a bipartisan fashion on Capitol Hill. He was a lifelong Democrat, but he always worked both sides of the aisle in advancing his organization's issues, and so I watched him being very successful at that. And when I first went to OJP in the early 90s, I really took those lessons to heart, because the fact that I was appointed by a Democratic president, I thought, I don't want to have that become a barrier to my working with the chair, for example, of our House Appropriations Subcommittee, Harold Rogers, who was from Kentucky, and by the way, is still, right now, he's done other things, but he's again the chair of that subcommittee right now. He's very familiar with OJP and the research funding and the other funding there. So that's somebody to keep your eye on. And I made a point of getting to know his staff and briefing them on some of the successful work we were doing. This is after the crime bill had passed that you would have knowledge of in 1994. And they had to make decisions because there were so many programs authorized in that hadn't been funded. And we also got his support for having a set aside from the billions of dollars they were appropriating for research. And so that made a big difference. Now that wasn't for specific programs, but it was to go to NIJ to give them more heft to fund particular programs. And again, so the reason I go into that detail is I'd really encourage you to consider a similar approach, to reach out to your members of Congress, and probably your school has a legislative office that can help with that. And again, to show how the results of your research have or could make a difference in the real world. Try to meet with those members, or at least their staff. And of course, the members rely on the staff. Crime is a hot topic right now, and see what can result from this. So turning to my second point, I would think more creatively about collaborations with practitioner partners in the field and what that can yield. Now, I'm sure you are undoubtedly doing this already, but I'd encourage you to double your efforts here. I was at the recent IACP police chiefs meeting out in Denver, and I was again reminded of how eager many chiefs and departments are to work with researchers. I was at a panel discussing the Obama White House Task Force on 21st Century Policing. I had been the co-chair of that panel. And a number of the participants pressed us from the audience. And by the way, Ted, I'm sorry to say this, but we had about 500 people at that program with standing room only. So don't take it personally. Anyway, several of them talked about their interest in and how do we go about it. And so several of us on the panel, a police chief and I, jumped in and said, reach out to your local colleges and universities, and they would be really interested in talking to you, undoubtedly. And these chiefs were really interested to hear that. And I was surprised they didn't already have some kind of relationship. But I think I would take advantage of that. Now, some of them probably won't be interested, but I think a lot of them would be interested. And it's not, of course, just police chiefs. It could be correctional leaders, someone who's heading a domestic violence program, or a victim service agency, whatever's relevant to your area of focus. And also, this is, I think, also an area where these practitioners may themselves have key ties with foundations that you haven't thought about tapping. They may have relationships themselves with members of Congress who could help with support through earmarks, and or knowledge of key state and local funding of which you may be unaware. Third point, it's clear, and I think we're all very specifically aware of this, that the DOJ funding agencies are, at a standstill right now, certainly with the government shutdown. And even before that, things were pretty grim. But I think we have to look at and prepare for the long game here. And it's important to keep in mind that these agencies have existed for some 50 years since LEAA, the Law Enforcement Assistance Administration, was created, I think, 57 years ago. One thing I did, because I first went into OJP, as Ted indicated, with the Clinton administration, and I did in both of my tenures at OJP, was hold what I called reunions of some of the prior leaders of the agency, not just at the top, but including the heads of NIJ and BJS. And it was selfish on my part. I wanted to learn from them. What were the lessons that they had garnered from their time there in dealing with each other and dealing with the field and dealing with Congress? And I did learn a lot from that. And one of the important things I did learn was about the bipartisan support that they really felt in running the programs. And I think that was, and that included the science side of it. So what can you all be doing here when the overall grant work is kind of a standstill? Currently would be the best label. I think certainly maintain relationships, if you have any, with staff and individuals who are in the science agencies. I would stay in touch with those close to the agencies who know what work is being undertaken and what priorities exist. Because those people who are there, at least ones that I know, certainly haven't shut off their minds. They still are thinking ahead. And as personnel are brought in, if this occurs, to head NIJ and BJS, do some research. Find out what they've written, where they've been active, and whether they have expressed anything in speeches about their areas of focus. My final comment on that, as I said, these funding agencies and DOJ have enjoyed broad bipartisan support over a lot of decades. I think it's very unlikely that funding will not flow again from these agencies in the future, even if it's not the immediate future. And acknowledging certainly that the picture right now is very grim. But my final advice is to look ahead, keep in close touch as to what is happening, and plan ahead for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. She mentioned the Police Chiefs Association. Before we go to Tyrell, I just have a point of personal privilege that I used to attend these meetings at which more than 10,000 police chiefs go every year at public expense. But the group has barred the news media now from attending the meetings, which I think is counterproductive. I think we all know that policing in many areas is suffering from a lack of public trust. By the way, the media are also, but I don't think it helps that much to bar the media from the meeting. I'm glad that Lori's program had 500 people, but you probably didn't hear about it because there weren't any outsiders there. So that's just my little sidelight here. Thankfully, ASC is open to the media. We're going to go on now to Tyrell Connor of Arnold Ventures. You might give a little bit about your background because I didn't have that as I did with Lori, but he's going to discuss again what Arnold Ventures is doing in this whole criminal justice area. So Tyrell.
Thank you. Before I give a little background about myself, I just want to tell you about a dream I have when I come to these events. One day, I've been pitching this to my team internally, that I would like to start this conversation by telling everybody to look under your chairs and say, you get a check, you get a check, you get a check. We're not there yet. It's been a tough sell, but keep rooting for me.
That's not what you do at Arnold Ventures?
We do it in some ways, but not the way that I would have fun doing it. And I think it would make this a lot more fun for me, being able to do that. But my name is Terrell. A little bit of background about myself. I've been at Arnold Ventures for about 3 years now. Before I was at Arnold Ventures, I was an associate professor at the State University of New York, and then I kind of transitioned out of academia into this space for reasons that I'm happy to discuss later on. But just kind of want to give you a high-level overview of what we do at Arnold Ventures. As you can imagine, with the funding cuts, and with Arnold Ventures being philanthropy, living donors, right, we weren't beholden to some of those restrictions that took place, and we actually became a resource to a lot of researchers and organizations that lost funding, and we set up things and mechanisms internally to kind of help and support folks that lost critical funding to keep projects moving forward that were aligned with our mission and what we were trying to do at Arnold Ventures. But for those of you who do not know much about Arnold Ventures, like I said, we're a philanthropy, and the mission is to maximize opportunity, minimize injustice. We have several different branches and teams, from public health to higher education. Criminal justice is a team that I work on, and I'll be kind of focusing on that today. And we have public finance, we have infrastructure teams, we have an evidence and evaluation team. So I mention all that too because I know in these spaces that folks are diverse as far as what they study and what their interests are, and so some of those other teams might be more relevant to what you're trying to accomplish as well. Each team operates differently, right? So that's also just important to know that what I'll share here today about the criminal justice team and our funding mechanisms may not be the same for other teams, but I can always talk about how you can get in touch with some other folks to make those connections happen and network and see if there are resources to your avail. But with the criminal justice team, we have several mechanisms related to funding, but I think what's most relevant to this particular audience would have to be with our research funding, which is our primary mode of funding currently. And the way Arnold Ventures and the CJ team operates is that, our ultimate goal is to make and create policy change. And so we have a research team, we have a policy team, we have advocacy teams, and then we have a communications team. But everything essentially begins with research for us. And we want to build evidence based on issues that are priority for us, priority in the country, And when we build enough evidence, then we kind of take that evidence and kick it over to our policy colleagues, where then they begin to landscape and figure out where are the best ways we can make tractions in different states across the country to make some changes happen. And of course, they work hand in hand with our advocacy and comms teams to also, whether it's framing messaging, getting boots on the ground to change legislation. We kind of have all these mechanisms internally to make these changes and transitions happen. But going back to how we primarily fund, like I said, most of it starts with research. We have an open RFP that's been open for almost about a year and a half, 2 years now, which I would say probably 80 to 85% of our funding comes through that. And it's called Community Safety and Causal Research. If you Google it on Arnold Ventures, you'll see it. It'll pop right up, be one of the first things on the search page, thanks to our comms team. And in that, there's a process where you submit an LOI. The LOI gets reviewed by 3 external reviewers. Then they give that feedback. Our VP, Ashna, she makes the decision whether to move forward or not for a full proposal. If you get invited to go for a full proposal, when that's submitted, it goes back to those same 3 external reviewers, and then a decision is made whether to move forward with your work for funding consideration or not. And that process, start to finish, takes about 120 days or so, but we're trying to bring that down to 90 days in 2026. And I think that's something we'll be able to accomplish because we want people to be able to move relatively quickly, so that way we can get the information out there. And as just mentioned, like making a panel in March about what's going to happen in November, right? It's tough because policy and the landscape is always changing, and so we want to kind of be flexible and nimble with our research requests because we know that priorities are going to change, things are going to look differently quarter to quarter, and so we want to be able to move faster in that regard. A little bit of information about how or what we fund. When we talk about research, we only fund and prioritize causal research. So mainly anything with an econometric design, so instrumental variables, difference in differences, regression discontinuity, and RCTs are the designs we pretty much fund. I think there is this kind of misconception when folks hear that it's only RCTs. I get that a lot. That's not the case. We actually probably fund RCTs the least because, as you can imagine, that's a pretty intensive design and always not the most ethical design in some regards. And so the other designs, the other quasi-experimental designs, we fund a lot more of, comparatively speaking, compared to the RCTs. But so I say all to say that if it's not going to be a causal design, it's not going to really be considered for funding considerations. And also, Arnold Ventures likes to really pay particular attention to designs that are evaluating some form of an intervention, because ultimately when we get the findings, we want to be able to take this to our policy colleagues and say, okay, now we have a path forward. And so that's always the big question our board asks when they're approving funds, is to say, okay, when we get these results, what can we do with it? And if they don't have a clear answer to that, then they're usually not going to fund it. And so you just want to keep that in the back of your mind when you're thinking about funding opportunities and what would be some good questions, right? And interventions can mean and look like different things in different settings, okay? And so we do cover pretty much all dimensions of the criminal justice system. So we have our community safety team, which does a lot of the policing work and CVI work, and then we have our courts team, which traditionally does a lot more work now on prosecution, but we're also experimenting with like holistic defense, and bail reform is our big one, where we have a lot of influence there. So a lot of successes we see in places like Illinois and things like that. A lot of funded research from Arnold Ventures helped move some of that stuff forward related to the bail reform changes, and we're having a lot of research now funding that. And then we also have post-conviction work, fines and fees, parole, probation, prisons and jails, et cetera. So pretty much if you do anything system-wide in this space, we have opportunities to fund you all and consider that. I'll stop shortly, but I'd also like to just, because sometimes depending on funders, questions are like, oh, how do we, what's the best method or the approach to, share ideas or see what is in alignment with what you all do? And the simple answer is just to reach out. A lot of times people don't know that because, yes, when comparatively speaking to maybe federal funders and other funders, right, it's pretty hands-off and cut dry and a formalized process. We submit, can't really have interactions with those who are reviewing, and all understandable, but that's not what it's like for us at Arnold Ventures. And so I always tell folks to reach out to me. If it's not me, I will point you in the right direction of the appropriate person, and then we can start that conversation to figure out and strategize together what's the most appropriate way forward for you all to get your ideas considered. And as you can imagine, that's a very successful approach, and it's time saving for both parties, right? Because we can really say what's going to work, what's not going to work, and then so whatever you do get to submit, it's going to be pretty much in alignment with what we were looking for and has high probability of moving forward, which is our main mission, is trying to make sure everyone can at least get their ideas on the table for funding considerations. And so there's a couple of things to keep in mind. We also have bridge days, bridge events. We just released a bridge interest form, and so our bridge events are kind of going along the lines of what we just discussed here, a really collaborative meeting with researchers and practitioners, where we have certain topics throughout the year. We do 24 bridge events a year, two bridge events a month, that come in and really try to, folks come in on a particular topic. So we've had them on like veterans affairs, we've had them on domestic violence cases, we've had them on immigration, and really brainstorm, what are like the 3 top questions that the field needs to answer, and now how can Arnold Ventures come in and try to fund and support some of these policy initiatives. And so why I say that is because we just released this bridge interest form where folks can now submit ideas or even say, hey, if I want to take part in these events, this is what I do, keep me in mind. As you can imagine, we're always looking for folks to invite to these events, and PH students like whoever, right, whatever of interest to you, we're looking for everyone who can engage in the research, engage in these conversations, and point us in the right direction. So I would suggest to you all to, again, constantly check the website. It changes, and you'll see what's of value and of importance to AV, and then by all means, reach out to us, and then we can continue these conversations. Thank you.
Thank you, Tyrell. As I said earlier, we will move next to Nancy Levine, who is now the dean at Rutgers, formerly and recently the head of the National Institute of Justice in the Biden administration, and before that at the Urban Institute. So, Nancy.
Thank you, Ted. So I asked to go last because I thought that would help me figure out what to say, and then I found out that what I have to say, smart people before me already said. So I'm going to try to fill in a little bit or emphasize some of the points that were already made. So Ted shared a little bit about my background, and of course, in this context, being the past director of NIJ is probably the most relevant in your minds. But I actually want to just emphasize that I was at the Urban Institute for almost 2 decades, and that's what we call a soft money environment. What does that mean? It means that you need to get grants to get paid and to support your team. And places like Urban and RTI, RAND, CNA, and I don't want to leave any out, ICA, I mean, these places are suffering mightily, and so many people have lost their jobs, as have my former colleagues at NIJ. And it's just a really horrible, tough time, and I just want to just take a moment to say, like, if you know people who have lost their jobs, take time to reach out to them, make them feel understood, empathize, be supportive. Now being in the academic environment, of course, people in universities have lost their jobs as well. We so far have been pretty lucky at Rutgers School of Criminal Justice, but there's a real cascading effect to all of these grant cancellations and the fact that we don't have any new solicitations to respond to. We have all these research ideas and really not enough places to go to get them funded. And we love that Arnold Ventures exists, and I'm very appreciative of your and Julie and Jen's efforts to try to come in and say, what can we help fund that was canceled? But y'all, with your focus on causal research only, that doesn't cover everything. And And I think it doesn't cover some of the really important work that's more exploratory in nature, what we call basic research, trying to understand mechanisms, or even trying to develop interventions that are ready to be evaluated. Those don't just come right out of the package ready to be evaluated. That takes research. That takes partnerships. So there's so much. There's just a real reason to grieve right now. I mean, I'll try to end in a more rosy place, but right now there's just a lot to grieve. I mean, you know, personally, professionally, almost every single grant award I made that was not to an academic institution was canceled. I mean, that's like some share, I don't know, some share of my legacy as NIJ director. I'm told that there's another list of cancellations. It's a spreadsheet, it exists. I know people who have seen it, of all the academic awards that are going to be canceled any day now. Now, the good news is, I heard that about 4 months ago. So any day now has not yet happened, and let's hope that it doesn't. Some of these awards that were canceled, there's a rhyme and reason that we can pretty much figure out. If you have the letters LGBTQ in your grant award, if you mention trans anything, if you have the dreaded D word, diversity, yeah, probably you're on the chopping block. But even awards on officer wellness, police officer wellness, canceled. Awards on alternative strategies to support de-escalation, canceled. It doesn't make sense to me. I wish there were someone we could lobby, and lobby in terms of not members of Congress, but lobby in terms of a new politically appointed head of the Office of Justice Program or the National Institute of Justice, but that's not the case. We can't get in there. We can't say, like, this is why this work is important. I know people who have tried valiantly to lobby members of Congress, please help restore this canceled work. It's so important. So far, not successful. I feel that it will change. I feel that some members of Congress are maybe figuring out what their principles are this week, and that they might be more open to education. But it's not a very happy place right now. Now, along with the intel I had about another wave of cancellations, I also heard that there is a plan to release what are now called NOFOs, Notifications of Funding Opportunities. We used to call them solicitations. They just changed the language. I'm told that there's a bunch that will be released. I was told that it would be any day now, about 4 months ago. So we really don't know what's up. Where does that leave us? What do we do? What's our strategy? Well, top on my list was what Lori already said. Collaborations, partnerships. Yes, we rely heavily on federal funding, but there are other ways that we can partner and generate resources to do research that really has an impact because of the nature of those partnerships, right? Because you're teaming with agencies or entities that really need the research to happen, that want to see it be conducted, and for that reason will be interested in the findings, but also willing to make changes because of them. So in my mind, that's how we should be spending our time, focusing on collaborations, partnerships, building your foundation for when the federal funding, I won't call them floodgates, reopen, but I do have a sense that they're not shut forever. I appreciate Lori's recommendation around lobbying. I will say I know that it's kind of hard to fathom being an individual professor or PhD student and saying, I'm going to go lobby my member of Congress. But there is an organization called COSA, the Consortium of Social Science Associations. That's like an association of social science associations. And COSA's job is to lobby and educate members of Congress on the importance of social science research. You can sign up for their newsletter. In March of every year, they have a lobbying campaign where they will train you on how to schedule a meeting with your member of Congress, how to prepare, what to say. They're always looking for more people, and of course, because they cover every social science topic under the sun, it's really important that ASC members be a part of this and educate members of Congress and their staff on the importance of federal science agencies around issues of safety and justice, primarily NIJ and BJS. Now, Lori, I'm not going to pick a fight with you, but this whole thing about earmarks, do you know they were the bane of my existence at NIJ?
Yeah, well, they were the bane of my existence too. But it depends what side of the desk.
Exactly. So when you're on the funding side of it, you have a fixed budget. And then you're told you have to take this share of the budget and give it to fill-in-the-blank university for a research project that they think is important, but you could think that doesn't even fill a gap anymore. We're already investing in heavily in that area. That drives me nuts. However, to your point, Laurie, now that I'm dean of Rutgers School of Criminal Justice, and I had a meeting, this quite recently, with our federal folks here in Washington. The first thing they said to me, which was music to my ears, is, Nancy, as dean, you have full authority to lobby. You don't have to ask your provost, you don't have to ask your chancellor. And I'm like, even for earmarks? So yes, I will be going after earmarks. Fair is fair. But more importantly, I'm excited to be able to lobby on behalf of NIJ and BJS and to educate from a position of having been a leader of NIJ and know the importance of the building that evidence and having concrete examples of that impact. So I'm very excited to do that. They were going to schedule meetings for me this week, but guess what? We're still shut down. So I will be back and doing my part, and I hope you all will do so as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. One other element that I don't know that our panelists have mentioned involves lawsuits, which I'm not sure are going to get anywhere, but just to mention this, I think many of you probably know that the Vera Institute of Justice, which is involved in programs here at ASC, along with some other groups, filed a lawsuit to challenge these cuts that we've been talking about, these federal cuts, but that, although I was not present, but I gathered that a federal district judge was sympathetic to this, but basically rejected the suit, said that there was not a basis for saying that these cuts were illegal. And I think a lot of you know that some of the cuts generally were made effective immediately and affected programs in progress. It wasn't just cutting funds for future research or programs, but things going on right now. And I believe there was a hearing a couple of weeks ago before the U.S. Court of Appeals here in Washington. I don't believe there's been a ruling issued on that. And there's some other similar lawsuits. Again, I've followed the courts for many years. I tend to think that these lawsuits may not be successful in this area. I don't know if our other panelists have any other views on that, but I just wanted to throw that in. Well, I think we've heard from the speakers, so now we'd like to open it up for any questions or comments from the audience, because we clearly haven't covered everything here, so are there things that you're interested in? So you all know that you can see there are lights shining at us, and we can't necessarily see everyone out there. So I think it would be good if you don't mind to come to the microphones in front so that we can actually see what's going on. So yes.
Hi, thank you so much. Great panel, and then Lori and the rest of you, thank you for being here. Everett Penn, former director of the Teen and Police Service Academy. I was a part of that NPR story that came out. Here's a good question for you as you helped us here. Indeed, the lawsuits may not allow us to receive money for future grants, but some of us had expenditures that have not been paid. Any feedback on that for us receiving our monies for monies that have already been expended, and we received that note that said that there may be an appeal process? Any thoughts on that?
Anyone?
I work with one organization, just serve as a volunteer, helping them on things, and I know that they had and have that issue as well. They've been told that it's under consideration and it will be dealt with in a positive manner. In other words, that they will get the money back. And I haven't inquired recently about it, so I don't know what the timetable is on that. But it seems that this is an OJP grant. It seems that there is acknowledgement, and was pretty quickly, by the whatever part of OJP in the grant administration side, that those costs did need to be reimbursed.
Does anyone else want to comment on that? Okay. Are there any, excuse me, are there any other questions or comments from the audience?
Well, while people are thinking, I have a question for Tyrell, if I may. So I love the 90-day turnaround goal. That is, I'm guessing, aspirational, but still pretty wonderful. Are you also looking for grantees to accelerate the research process, or can that take the time it needs to take?
No, it takes the time it needs to take. So how much time you need, I would say probably on average, most of our projects that we fund are about 3 years or so. But yeah, we don't expect the PIs to move quickly. As long as it's within a reasonable timeline, then we're okay with funding how long it takes. It's just on our end, we want to make sure the funds get out so folks can start to work, particularly too when we think about if someone's doing a difference in differences and there's a recent policy change that just happened or is about to happen, right? Well, we want to make sure they get the funds to get it started, or if it's a new program and they are open to doing an RCT, but it starts in 2 months, right? We want to be, let's have the funds so that everyone can be resourced to execute this research design. And so on our end, the timeline is more so on our end and not really on the researchers' end.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. Anyone else from the audience? I'm sorry that our message here is somewhat negative, but we're trying to reflect reality out there, and I think we have done that.
I have another.
Yes, Nancy.
I'm curious about, I'm sorry, Tyrell, but here I go. Thank you, Arnold Ventures, for stepping in and trying to rescue some of the grants that were already underway. I understand that there's some other groups of philanthropic organizations that are doing similar in certain topical areas. Can you just share more, I don't know, like how many were you able to salvage, or and anything else you know about efforts to help support research that was already underway? And allow me to just say, time is of the essence, and almost too much time has gone already, because when you start collecting data and then have to stop, you're basically back to square one within a few months' time.
Yeah, no, great question. Thank you for asking that. I think, I don't know the exact number, but we've had quite a few, I would say, and we call them internally last mile requests. And so essentially there are folks who are towards the tail end of their project and their research, and the funding got pulled and they couldn't complete it. And so they would come to us, and we actually have separate funding mechanisms in place through leadership in the board, that they would go straight to them and consider it, also to try to expedite some of these funds even quicker than what we normally do, so that folks have an opportunity to get the funding continued and not really harp or mess up their projects too much. We're currently in the end of the year, so there's a lot of conversations heading into next year. This was the first year, as you can imagine, for a lot of reasons why the board had to actually consider this kind of work. And so now I know conversations, okay, what does this look like moving forward org-wide. I'm sure they're probably going to institutionalize things a bit more and make it more formalized in a sense where we'll have a clearer picture, because it was kind of like, oh, people just running to us, and then we're trying to figure out, okay, how can we get these funds quickly? But now that we have a sense of how we operate internally and how, how it's working externally, I think heading into 2026, we'll have a better idea of
Yeah.
how we can do this.
I hadn't realized it was just those that were at the very tail end. That's still, there's so many, well, I mean, it's already happened. People have lost their jobs. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen.
Yes.
Hi, I have a question. Sorry, Tyrell, to
No,
pile
go
on.
ahead.
Is there, I know AV is focused on causal research. Is there any sense that at some point they might broaden that scope to allow researchers to engage in exploratory research, to engage in development, other types of projects that could then lend themselves to experimental design later on?
Yeah, great question. There's a couple ways to answer this. Like, I've been at AV for 3 years, and so my first half at AV was different leadership, and we were more open and receptive to mixed methodologies and designs, and then leadership changes, and then so priorities change, and so this is where we are now. And then leadership's going to change again, and I'm sure priorities will change again. And so currently, do we have some mechanism? Sure. We have what are known as planning grants. And so, the RFP is really for projects that are ready, right? We have the data we know we want to get, the connections, the collaborations, et cetera, and we know exactly how the design is going to run, so we're going to submit there. But we understand with a lot of these designs, there needs to be some kind of, groundwork, right, before you can see if a design is feasible or not. And so the planning grants, and that's a great question, because the planning grants happen more informally, because the RFP is probably our most formal process where you have to, submit. The planning grants don't get submitted through that portal. It will come to me, and then I would workshop it with you. We have conversations and try to really fine tune it before we send it up to leadership. And the planning grants have even a shorter timeline where we're supposed to have a funding decision within 30 days. And with the planning grants, as you can imagine, there's going to be more opportunity for exploratory work, because you're saying, hey, we just throwing this out there. Eventually, we think we can get to an RCT, but we need some more time to see or collect the data, quality check, maybe build connections. And so internally, we've loved having this as an instrument, because it gives us a lot more discretion and are able to get folks to the table who are working their way to a causal design, but still doing much of the important work that Nancy just mentioned. And Rand, I should have said this in my background as well. I'm a qualitative researcher by training, right? And so going into this, coming at AV, I was coming to do one particular thing, and now I am reviewing econometric designs and giving feedback as a qualitative researcher, right? And so in my heart and in many of my colleagues' heart, we still want to, and we still push for internally, opportunity, space for other designs. And so this is why we say, come to us, right? Although, and through the eyes of other folks, right, it may not be of as high value to the majority of my colleagues, it's very important. And we will try our best to work with you to get something ready. And more often than not, it's getting, someone who is well-versed in econometric research, a part of your research team, right? And we are happy to have conversations and pair you. We have tons and tons of folks who are well experienced in this, and then we pair folks together where projects can move forward now, because you have that level of expertise, but you can still do your level of expertise on this project in different ways. And so there are ways we can strategically try to make something happen, even if that isn't your main form of research. And one more thing I would add, we had a causal inference workshop here at ASC yesterday, and we host these at various conferences throughout the country, throughout the year, and so that's something else to pay attention to too, because what has happened is, what we noticed, this was like our first year really doing this, and so we saw a lot of researchers who don't have causal experience attend these workshops and then kind of learn, oh, this is what I need to pull off or execute this, and then they went and connected those dots themselves and have gotten funding, right, even though they're not causal researchers. And so we've been pushing and putting resources out there so folks can get a greater understanding, and we don't want you to be intimidated by just hearing, oh, causal research only, there's no opportunity for me. That's not the case. Like I said, reach out and we'll try to strategize and see how we can make something happen.
Can I ask a quick follow-up? Is there a dollar threshold for the planning grant?
Yes, so planning grants are usually up to $100,000, up to a year in funding. Max, they generally like to see 7-8 months of work for planning grants. And so if it's within that threshold, it would qualify as a planning grant.
I'd like to ask, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. My name is Paulina Ornelas, and I represent Innovations for Poverty Action. And we usually re-grant funding, research funding as well. And I wanted to just confirm real quick with you, Terrell, if Arnold Venture focuses on funding research in the US specifically only. All right, well, in that case, I also wanted to make a brief comment in that IPA, we fund research in other places outside of the US. So perhaps this could be a good complement for Arnold Ventures RFP. We currently have an RFP open under our Peace and Recovery Initiative, and that and it's applicable for causal research as well as the same as Arnold Ventures. And we're currently expecting to open another call for proposals soon. We still don't know the timeline, the right timeline yet, but and specifically focused on citizen security. So we encourage you all to look at our website, Innovations for Poverty Action, and I think that could be also a good complement perhaps for interventions that have been tested in the US with support from Arnold Ventures that also want to be tested outside of the US. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we close, I just wanted to ask the panelists sort of an open-ended question. Are there particular areas that deserve research? Now, I know we all have our own interests, so we can reel off all sorts of topics that we know deserve research, you know, police use of force or progressive prosecution or mass incarceration. Another obvious topic right now is artificial intelligence, but I'm just throwing out things. Are there any areas that the panelists would put on the top of their list that really need more research right now? Or have I named them all?
At Arnold Ventures, we kind of have running lists of priority areas, and that changes over time. Some things are released publicly, some things are not on the website. But I would say currently, I know the board is really excited with things related to DNA. I know there's excitement around summer youth employment programs. I know there's excitement around holistic defense and some prosecution things. Bail, there's excitement, but politically, with our comms team and stuff like that, there's just conversations about how we address that, not trying to get backlash with certain things. Because similar to what I was mentioned here, Arnold Ventures takes a nonpartisan approach, and so it's very important for them to remain open to both sides of the aisle. In the post-conviction space, we're looking at employment programs and prison education programs, and CVI work, community violence interruption work, as well, are some of the things that I know that are like really floating around and getting a lot of excitement internally for us.
Yeah, I can make my answer very quick. Look at all the canceled grants that I funded as an NIJ director. Those should be priorities.
Ted, I think that more research needs to be done on the question of public understanding about how the criminal justice system works. And it really goes, Tyrell, to, I think, your point about the bail area as an example.
Yeah.
Because there, as we know, is a good deal of research in that area. But lawmakers and probably judges oftentimes don't seem to understand the results of that research. So better understanding what it is we do know and whether that research has reached public policy makers and justice system practitioners, as well as citizens at large. I think that those are very important
Yeah.
aspects to making democracy work in this area.
Yeah, well put, Lori, and that was one swath of research grants that we awarded under our implementation science solicitation, and something that I was very passionate about as NIJ director. Even if we have the evidence, how do we know it's getting in the right hands, and what do those hands need to know or have in order to implement that knowledge successfully and to measure the impact? So, yeah.
Okay, a question or comment?
Yeah, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the panel. So my question is more about kind of the skill building that it takes to write a grant and the time it takes. I'm finding that assistants in my department, you know, they have great ideas, but maybe they're not sure that it's the best place to put their energy in the current climate. So I'm wondering if you could speak to if, from your vantage point, any mechanisms or skills need to evolve in the way we write grants or submit them in order to be successful in the current situation.
Yeah, I'll take a crack at that. I don't know how to answer that in the context of the current administration. I mean, there's really nothing to go after. But having been on both sides of it, seeking grants, giving grants, I would advise there are resources on the NIJ website. When I was there as director, I sent out a letter to the field saying, here's what our team of scientists have observed about what makes for a successful proposal and some of the pitfalls that we routinely see that you can avoid. We also worked very hard to find some grantees who were willing to share their successful proposals. That took a little bit of time. I don't know what still exists on the website because it's all down. It's all down. Oh, excellent. Well, maybe it will come back again. But and you can always try to exercise your FOIA rights and see if you can get successful awards that way. I've done that in the past. But I also think finding more senior faculty who have been successful and are willing to mentor and team up with your junior faculty is a really good strategy as well.
Thanks. Yes.
Hi, yes, my name is Daniel Travato. I'm from Northeastern University. And I have a quick question. So, first of all, it's a great discussion on funding and grants. And this question goes out to Arnold Ventures, but anyone else can answer this, of course. So you mentioned that big pillars of Arnold Ventures is research, policy, and advocacy. And I don't want to lose focus, though, on like the advocacy part of that, which came up in the previous question. So I had a question on like how your organization has been adapting in terms of advocacy and that like final stage of science communication, because there's still a lot of important work that's being done and has been done. If you recall, recently, things like the crime solution page went down, and that was like a big resource for people, and so in showing like what works and what doesn't work. So I was wondering how your organization has adapted, taken action, and ensured like proper and just like advocacy, because the research and grants is really important, but also that final end of like what works and how we can disseminate this to the public is really important as well.
A great question, and you know, I'm not the most experienced on our team in that space, but I have some visibility into what they do, and I know they have spent a lot of time really just trying to ensure that the work that we are confident about gets shared. Our advocacy team is really great at also helping us identify whether it's grassroots organizations or state legislations, et cetera, those pockets of opportunity where we can still have momentum and change even in this particular climate. And they've also been, even more so probably than in the past, working with, you know, being more intentional about which states and which, you know, political philosophies they work with, and understanding that their main goal is that we want to be able to create change in any climate. And so as you can imagine, there's a lot of pivoting that's probably happened with how we frame things and narration around things, because, you know, in some philosophies you can use certain terms, and then in others you can't. So it's like, okay, what term can we use that's more palatable or digestible for this, but still, we still get the outcome we want. And so that's what our comms and advocacy team has been really conscious about, trying to strategize, and then also even how we frame our research questions or research calls, and chiming in that occasionally as well. And a lot of times they also bring opportunities to, say, the research team and saying, hey, you know, I remember that particular, there was places in Memphis and others that were like getting, they're really trying to dismantle a lot of things related to bail reform off of things that were non-factual. And they were like, hey, can we pour some funds into local universities or research out? Can we find some? We were able to do that, and they were really able to counteract pretty quickly some of the misinformation that was being putting out there with things that were essentially like planning grants, right? And when they were able to move quickly, less than a year, have that information out, and then our advocacy team was able to successfully take that and then make some cases and build around that narrative. So those are some ways we all kind of work, and it ebbs and flows and it looks different, but we try to have those conversations pretty frequently to make sure we're on the same page.
I had two thoughts. One, to your point, Christy, about how everything's been taken down from the website. I have successfully used the Wayback Machine to look at archived web pages and grab some of the materials that I was addressing earlier. So I recommend that people do that when and if they start releasing requests for research proposals. It might be good to, in advance of that, to go to the Wayback Machine and see what was posted before January 21st of this year, solicitations, and a page that I think is called Forthcoming Funding that had little blurbs of different topics, some of which will go away, but others will, if they ever spend their appropriation, will appear but be adjusted. So it's a way to think in advance and plan in advance. The other thing I will say is that when the Trump administration, Trump 1 came in, they did a lot of things you would expect if they were going to fund research. So there was one request for proposals that was specifically about the relationship between immigration and crime, and whether, you know, people who are immigrants or undocumented are committing more crime. So the way this request for proposals was written was incredibly offensive. The title was offensive. There were words in there that were offensive. I was trying to encourage my team at Urban, but we can still do it our way. Why don't we just propose? And people are like, we're not touching that. Well, thankfully, other people did. And under the Trump administration, I think a collection of 4 or 5 research projects on the general topic of this relationship between crime and people who are immigrants or undocumented were funded. Well, by the time I got to NIJ as director, all of them were coming to a close. And guess what? They all said what we knew the research would show, which is there's not a relationship, it's inverse. And I got to be the director to sign off on all those reports and get that out into the world. So the moral of my story is go after these opportunities. The remaining science staff care about good science. They want the truth. And it's a long runway from applying to a grant and having it awarded and getting the work done. And by then, for sure, we're going to see a different administration. Dear God, I hope. In some way or another, right? I mean, unless Trump really can run again. But that's probably not a good thing to close on, so thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. Are there any other, it's your last chance for the audience. We have to end in a couple of minutes here, but we still have a few minutes if anyone has any more questions. If not, we thank the panelists and thank you all for coming and hope we had some useful advice.